For this set of lectures, what we want to discuss is this idea of comparative political economy, or how do you talk about economics within a state when I'm trying to examine across states. Now, it's very easy to get bogged down in comparative political economy. When you read a chapter in a textbook on economics, you have lots of fairly complicated terms, many of which aren't particularly familiar to most students. It's also easy to get bogged down in political economy because most of the way that we think about economics working doesn't necessarily operate quite the same in other states as it does in an advanced state like the United States. So what I want to do for this particular set of lessons is I want to try to skip some of the technical details or some of the more complicated concepts, and I want to take a step back and I want to begin by asking a couple of questions about why we should care about the economy to begin with. Why is this something that in political science or that in comparative politics we're going to be so concerned with? And the answers to these questions are going to hinge on a couple of different perspectives. First of all, what we have to understand is that when leadership is making a decision about what to do in a country or about the role that it should be playing in the country, economics are usually first and foremost in that decision-making calculus. The second reason is that when individual citizens or subjects of a state are trying to determine how much support to give the state or how many demands to take or issue to the state, usually the most important factor is the strength of the economy and how economics is related to their personal lives. So what I want to do is I want us to look at three basic questions, three underwriting questions that are the most important to a comparative political economist. And then as you're reading the text or as you're watching some of the other videos in the series, you may be able to figure out how the specific details come back to these three questions. So what is the first one? Well, the first of these really important questions is going to be, who should control the economy? There are a few different ways of thinking about the answer to this. One argument is that really no one should be in control of the economy, that the economy should somehow be left up to market forces or market-driven forces, that individuals who are involved in the marketplace or individuals who consume or produce products, those should be ultimate deciders, the ones who really determine the direction the economy is going to go. A second argument goes that maybe we should let the elites, the traditional power centers of the economy, make the decisions. The elites are the ones who have the most to gain and the most to lose if an economy fails. They're the ones who are going to reap the biggest profits or who are going to suffer the biggest losses if a risk factor turns south. So we should let those people, the ones who have the most to get out of economic growth, be the ones responsible. A final answer is that actually we should leave it up to the government, that part of the regime responsible for making authoritative decisions. The logic behind government decision-making is that government officials have a different set of incentives or a different set of interests. Rather than worrying about themselves, government officials have a reason to want to grow the entire economy, create a stable and robust economy. They also have access to information about what sectors of the economy are doing the best or how our country, our state is competing against other states when we're talking about a particular field. For that reason, many scholars who look at developing states or third world nations will often place a particular incentive on government-led investment or government-led growth, with the assumption that it's the government who has an incentive to modernize the state and look to the future, rather than just focusing on old levels or old ways of doing business. Okay, so that's the first question. What's the second question? The second question is, do we care who the winners and losers are within the economy? And if we do care, why do we care? The thing about economics is that any economic system, or any political system for that matter, is effectively about picking who's going to benefit and who isn't going to benefit from the current status quo. There are always going to be winners and losers. Even in the most poorly developed country, even in the most suffering economy, there will always be those individuals who are kind of taking advantage of the system or taking advantage of the state, or who are profiting even if it's out of the misfortune of others. One argument, the market-based perspective, would say that no, we really don't care. That it really comes down to who's doing the best job of making money, who's using their time in energy and investments most wisely. And it's really not up to the state to in any way get involved in profit-making winners and losers in the economy. Now, on the yes side, there are actually three different reasons, three kind of separate reasons why we might care who the winners and losers are. One is because of egalitarian preferences in our state. That we basically want everyone in the state to have the same standard of living. We want everyone to participate equally or to benefit equally from the society. Maybe we want everyone to have a common median standard of living, with no one too rich and powerful, no one too poor and destitute. Or maybe we just care that we have lowest levels of poverty possible. It's not that we want to have an overall high standard of living. We just don't think that anyone should live below the poverty line. And therefore, we might have to have some intervention to make sure that happens. A second yes answer gets back to this elite argument, that we care who wins and who loses because we want the elites to win. Now, this might not make sense if you come from a market-based society like the United States. But in many countries, there's actually this sort of preference that the people who have continue to get more. And in fact, that may be the way that our system works as well. A third final yes answer is that, in fact, we care who wins because we want the regime to win. We want the current political system to win. Not necessarily that the political system is going to profit, but that the current political system might collapse if the economy goes south, or if sectors of the economy begin to grow too quickly that are outside of the regime or the government's control. And so for that reason, the leadership may just want to make sure that they keep their jobs, and so they care who the winners or losers are, because the winners are the ones who get to pick who's in control. So finally, the third question. How much or what types of risk are acceptable? Risk is this idea of, if I invest money, if I engage in a particular strategy, what's the likelihood that I'm going to get a payoff? The assumption is that if I take on high-risk situations, then my rewards are also going to be higher. So there might be this desire among the government to be willing to take high-risk positions, or among individuals in this estate to take high-risk positions. That way the rewards can be greater in the future. The problem is that if you're living close to the poverty line, if your state is already in subsistence living, if you're already worried about how you're going to feed your people, high-risk strategies can be devastating. If you're always one bad decision or one bad rain away from famine, taking risky strategies or risky decisions with the wealth of your state might mean that millions of people starve. So we have to be aware of what a state's risk level is. And then the last thing that we may need to worry about in terms of risk level is, are we willing to take short-term risks, or are we going to be looking for a sustainable long-term risk platform? This is the exact same thing that you consider if you're managing your own private investments. If you're the government that's in power right now, you have a very strong incentive to think in the short term, the next 1 to 2 years. In a democracy, until the next set of elections are going to be held. On the other hand, if you think that you're going to be in power for a long period of time, or if you're more concerned about state development or the health of your party long term, you might want to take longer term focuses when you're thinking about how we're going to invest the money in the state. What would a sustainable economic development look like? Not just rapid returns, but do I need to invest in education for kindergartners, even though I know that a 5-year-old isn't going to be part of the economy for at least another 8 or 9 years?